You're going to have a quiz question this week about the difference between inductive and deductive thinking. And it's important because how we find explanations, it depends on what angle we take. With inductive, you make observations first and come up with your conclusions later. The deductive is the opposite. You have a conclusion first, and then you're testing with data whether or not your conclusion is actually correct or not. So with inductive, you're able to generate an explanation. With deductive, you're able to test the explanation. All right, so make sure you keep those two concepts separate. Inductive, you don't know what you're looking for at first. Deductive, you know what you're looking for. Now, we use mathematics in deductive testing, so most research that we publish is actually deductive, and it's easier to test ideas than it is to come up with new explanations. And so when we think about why people choose a social work degree, people tell you their story about what motivated them to become a social worker. You can get ideas based on the stories they tell you. That's inductive. In order to test this deductively, though, we would have to already have explanations, like people experienced some social challenge in their life, therefore they want to help people with that challenge, or people met a social worker when they were younger and they were inspired by that. Whatever the reasons people have, if you already have a list of them, then you could do a survey and ask people whether or not those specific reasons motivated them, and you could have percentages then based on that deductive study, right? So with deductive, you basically already know what the options are and just let people choose from a list of options, versus inductive is just interpreting the stories that people tell you. So in our daily life, we're mostly doing inductive observations and coming up with explanations that make sense, but deductive is the only real proof that it is true or not, because once we standardize the responses, then we can assign numbers to it, and when we assign numbers to it, we can prove with statistics whether something is statistically meaningful or not. Put a medical context to this. We want to think about what was the original source of COVID, right? You could ask people and get or make observations. That's inductive, and in order to prove it, you'd have to use deductive methods. So we can prove that it may have started in a particular place in the world based on genetics data of the virus and known data on how things change. So we can eliminate possibilities that are true or not true based on deductive ways, but the original guess starts with something inductive. Depending on your pattern of thought, you might, so say here it has, why do undergraduate students choose social work? If that's your question and you're doing inductive, you would do interviews with people. And in those interviews, people would give you some answers, and after you ask many people, you might start to hear some of the same answers again and again. When you start to get repetitive answers, we say you've reached saturation, and you don't have to continue once it's very obvious that you're getting the same answers again and again. So you'll end up with some answers, but the challenge with inductive is there's a limited number of people that you can get data from. You're likely only going to get 20, 40 people or something like that, and then you're just going to run out of time to do this, or it just gets kind of overwhelming in your mind. So inductive is always limited in the number of people that we can collect data from, because it's more time consuming to collect, more time consuming to analyze. The deductive approach would be you already have your list of options, and then you could do a survey, and you can mail out that survey to tens of thousands of people through the National Academy of Social Work and have them choose from that list of options what were the motivating factors. And you can get the data in a matter of a week. You can run simple frequencies on it in 3 minutes, and then you can prove whether or not people choose social work because of some personal reason or for some reason that they just knew someone that was in that field, or it's just in their heart. They just felt the need to help a certain subpopulation, and this was the pathway to do so. So deductive is actually faster to collect data and scales up much larger. And this is why most published studies are deductive, because you can have greater external validity. Because you've collected on more people, you're more likely to find something that is in fact true for a greater number of people. However, it's limited because by its very design, you're limited to the range of options you chose in advance. You can have an open-ended question if you want, but interpreting that at the large scale gets hard. So there's very little open-ended questions there. And so, so we end up with different results in a deductive study, almost always percentages and things related to some kind of statistics. We have less depth, but we have more breadth in the sense that we can cover a lot more people. There's no limit to the size of a data sample for a deductive study, versus an inductive study is by default a very limited number of people that you're able to reach and interview and think about their answers. All right, so that's it for the inductive versus deductive approach. So be sure for your test that you're prepared to think about the differences. Inductive develops theory, deductive tests theory.